Connections Radio presents
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we're going to be doing something a tad bit different as we are going to be talking about the Buffalo Sabres. More importantly, I'm going to be making an argument to you that the Buffalo Sabres can make the playoffs. And I'm going to give you not one, not two, not three, not four, but how I'm going to give you 5 reasons as to why the Buffalo Sabres will snap the longest playoff drought in NHL. And the Buffalo Sabres, for the first time since 2010, will be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is going to be a fun episode here on PR Connections Radio with your host, Ian Rachiele. Now, I want to mention, go to our website, www.prconnectionsradio.com. Check out all the amazing content we have on the network, about a dozen shows on there. So there is so much content being put on the network daily. We also have Vegas Hockey Hub, which uploads every single day from 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central. And this is going to be a really fun episode. We're going to be putting up on all our social media pages at Vegas Hockey Hub. So if you want to support the show and support the content, I highly recommend checking that out. Now, to kind of set this up, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres organization, is there some promise with Buffalo? Yes. Is there upside with Buffalo? Yes. But is there doubt in Buffalo? Also, yes. You have to remember, this is a Buffalo Sabres team that the last time we talked about them, and it was a few months back when we did our last show on Buffalo, Don Granato was just stuck in neutral. Didn't seem like really anything positive was going to happen in the Don Granato era. You also had Kevin Adams, who was trying to make moves, trying to get things done, but he just could not get it done in terms of the bang-bang superstar move that some people thought were going to happen with Buffalo. However, what we saw from Kevin Adams was small, minor moves that ended up helping the Buffalo Sabres long term. Let me give you an example on what I mean. The trade between Bowen Byram and Casey Middlestat happened at the trade deadline, and it kind of went under the radar. You know, having 2 former first-round picks essentially swap for each other. Middlestat goes to Colorado, Bowen Byram goes to Buffalo. But when you look at what the trade was, it was a sign that the Buffalo Sabres were willing to let go of some players from the 2015, 2016, 2017 era and move forward into the current era we are in now. We're no longer in the Jason Botterill GM era. No, we were looking at the Kevin Adams era and what he was trying to cement and implant out there in Buffalo. And I actually look at what the roster has right here, right now, and there is a lot of promise here. There's some good that can come from the Buffalo Sabres and them possibly making the playoffs. You have to remember what just happened a few months prior, okay? Taking you back to what has happened recently, this is a Buffalo Sabres organization that their win-loss record this past season really does not reflect what they have done as an organization really heading forward. Just to give you some backstory on this, just to give you some statistics on this. This past season, 2023-2024, the one that just ended, your Buffalo Sabres finished 6th in the Atlantic Division, ahead of Ottawa and ahead of Montreal. It's also the same Buffalo Sabres team that in the Atlantic had 39 wins, 37 losses, and 6 overtime losses. Or, as some people would say, they had 39 wins and 43 losses. However, that 84 points was just not enough. It was 7 points behind the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. So despite them having 39 wins and being ahead of the Senators and the Canadiens, the Buffalo Sabres did not do enough to make the playoffs. You also have to remember that this is a team that was 7 points behind the Detroit Red Wings, who were 5th in the Atlantic Division. So 7 points back from the wild card, 7 points back from the team ahead of you in the Atlantic. So what does that mean for Buffalo long term? What does it mean to Buffalo heading into 2024-2025? What is a move that needed to be done to make the Buffalo Sabres a playoff team? What could be the first move that would make this possible? How about bringing back a legend? Bringing back a contender, someone who actually embraces the city of Buffalo, and more importantly, the person that was in Buffalo the last time they were successful. For the people who already know, this is Lindy Ruff. He is one of the most successful coaches in Buffalo Sabres history. The last time they made it to a Stanley Cup final, Lindy Ruff was there. The last time they made it to a deep playoff run, Lindy Ruff was there. The last time they even sniffed the postseason, you guessed it, Lindy Ruff was there. This was a Buffalo Sabres team that when you look at what they did right, a lot of it pointed back to Lindy Ruff. So, firing Don Granato, and I'm not pointing all the blame on him, it just seemed like it was long overdue. It seemed like when it came to the Buffalo Sabres, there was only so much Don Granato could accomplish in Buffalo. He had to move on. They had to bring in somebody that could right the ship. Lindy Ruff could be that guy. To give you some context on Lindy Ruff, let's not forget that his tenure in New Jersey was toxic. Very toxic what happened in New Jersey. They were trying to fire Lindy Ruff. It felt like every other game out there with the Devils. And when it eventually happened and they eventually moved on from Lindy Ruff, a lot of people wondered, was this going to be the it? Was this going to be the end of his era out there in the NHL? Was he going to retire? Was he going to do very similar to a Barry Trotz and go into front office and go into management? But no. What they did and what the Buffalo Sabres did that could make them a playoff contender is they brought in someone who embraces the culture out there in Buffalo, New York. They brought in a member of the NHL that sees Buffalo as an accomplishment, as an achievement. And it's felt like for the last decade, you haven't really seen a lot of people really embrace the Buffalo Sabres from an outsider's perspective. So when it comes to Lindy Ruff, bringing him back is vital to the Buffalo Sabres. Having a guy that knows the culture and embraces the city is going to be a must-see. And I'm going to put this out here right now. Do not be surprised if it is not 24-25, but 25-26, that Lindy Ruff gets the most out of Tage Thompson. He gets the most out of Rasmus Dahlin. He gets the most out of guys like Alex Tuck and Peyton Krebs and Jack Quinn. This is a coach that has done well at getting the most out of certain players when he is the head coach of that organization. Do not be surprised if that ends up happening in Buffalo as well, where he ends up having career highs from certain players that you did not expect when Lindy Ruff gets there. So when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, as we are talking about them here on Vegas Hockey Hub, the second part of how the Buffalo Sabres can make the playoffs, their core is promising. You have a young, upcoming core. And when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, when you actually look at what they have right here, right now, this is an organization that you have Alex Tuck, you have Tage Thompson, you have Jason Zucker, but more importantly, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres organization, having Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, Bowen Byram, he also brought over Connor Clifton from the Boston Bruins. This is a Buffalo Sabres team that has a good, bright future, and their core four. I only do four. I know there's some people who want to have the entire roster be your core. No, your four core members of the Buffalo Sabres is Alex Tuch, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, and Tage Thompson. Now, there's going to be some people who are going to try to argue that, Jack Quinn could be there. Oh, Zach Benson could be there. I know some people are going to try to make an argument that, for example, maybe somebody like Mattias Samuelsson could try to sneak in there. On the goaltending, you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, you have Devin Levi. But no, I'm going to keep the four very simple. The four core members is Tage Thompson, who can light up the net. All right, Tage Thompson, who this past season in 23-24, he had 29 goals in that season, which is incredible by the Buffalo Sabres. So Tage Thompson will be your legit goal scorer out there in Buffalo. He's part of your core. And then you have Alex Tuch, who not only did you acquire from the Jack Eichel trade, but more importantly, he is the heart of Buffalo. He came from New York. He was born just a little bit away from Buffalo. So overall, when you're talking about Tage Thompson, he's going to be your goal scorer. Alex Tuch, he's going to be your heart of Buffalo. And then Rasmus Dahlin will be your anchor of the defense. There's a reason why you drafted him first overall all those years ago. Rasmus Dahlin is going to be somebody that you're going to depend on every single night, night in and night out. And then Owen Power is your upcoming defensive superstar. This is someone at Owen Power who, when you drafted him first overall, he is making a return on that investment, and he's doing that very well. So overall, when it comes to the core of the Buffalo Sabres, and when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres and everything they're doing right here, right now, this is a Buffalo Sabres organization that has a future core that could lead them to the playoffs, and that's what I'm predicting right here, right now. This is a Buffalo Sabres team that can make the playoffs in 24-25, and it is on the back of Tage Thompson, on the back of Alex Tuch, on the back of Rasmus Dahlin, and on the back of Owen Power. So, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres organization, let's move over to, like I said, you have your core members, what you're looking at right there, right now. But I have to ask a very important question when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres. What is your strength? What is, in terms of depth, the biggest positive the Buffalo Sabres have? Because looking at what you have this season, remember, you have guys like Rasmus Dahlin, who just came off a near 60-point season out there in Buffalo. You have a guy like Owen Power, who actually had a positive plus-minus, which is good for someone like Owen Power. You ended up having some young defensemen in that system. I already talked about Bowen Byram. Jacob Bryson, he is actually someone that is in a young guy, someone they could use as a member of there. Mattias Samuelsson, he only played half the year, but this is someone who did do some good amount of work in that limited amount of time. And then on defense, you also have some young up-and-coming guys the Buffalo Sabres can have on that roster. For example, there is some players that you could take as a member of the Buffalo Sabres, and you could actually use them to your advantage. But there's one player that I want to spotlight very quickly. One player that I do want to mention, because when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres organization, let's look at what they did just in this draft. okay, what they did in this past draft with the Buffalo Sabres, because there was somebody that did catch my attention. And that person, by the way, is a certain individual they drafted in just the first round, and that is Zach Benson. Zach Benson, who made it as a first round pick, someone in your organization that is doing a fantastic job out there in Buffalo. And, you look at a guy like Zach Benson and you see him as what he is. He is someone who is only a 19-year-old, will be 19 years old by the time of this recording. And then he played his first season in Buffalo this past year, and he had 11 goals in 71 games out there in Buffalo. Wow, what a great situation there. So when you look at Zach Benson, he is a big part of what the biggest strength of the Buffalo Sabres is. And if you haven't figured out what that is, it is that the farm system is strong in Buffalo. The farm system is the best strength of the Buffalo Sabres. The fact that you have such a great farm system, and you have so many young guys in the wings that are just waiting to be on the main roster, it really tells you all you need to know about the Buffalo Sabres. And I use my sources. I credit my sources here. Shout out to Cap Friendly for this information. But not only do you have a 19-year-old in Zach Benson, but you have a 23-year-old in Dylan Cousins, who you are hoping will turn into that great player. He came from your farm system. You have Peyton Krebs, 23 years old. You got him from the Golden Knights, but he eventually developed in your farm system. He was in the AHL for a while. There's also the same team that has had a 21-year-old like Tyson Kozak. You also have some good young players in the defense that grew up in this system. I'm going to give you an example. Jack Quinn, he was on the forward side of it. But you also have a young defenseman in Ryan Johnson, who they ended up getting when it came to the Buffalo Sabres. He's playing with them right now. So, overall, this is a Buffalo Sabres organization that when you study what they have done, so much of their talent hasn't even made the main roster yet. Or if they have made the main roster, they're just starting out. They're just getting there. I haven't mentioned Noah Ostlund, who is a 20-year-old who was a first-round pick that they acquired from the Jack Eichel trade. That's who the first-round pick ended up being. He is part of it. You also end up having Devin Levi, only 22 years old. Yes, I understand he got drafted by Florida, but they acquired him as a prospect in the Sam Reinhart trade. So, overall, when you study what the Buffalo Sabres have done, the farm system has been a major part of what they have accomplished with the Buffalo Sabres. So, overall, that is a big part of what the Buffalo Sabres have done. And moving over, as we're talking about this here on Vegas Hockey Hub, I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And, we talked about the core, we talked about Lindy Ruff, but there's one part we have not addressed yet, and we're going to talk about that just here in a second on Vegas Hockey Hub. Technical difficulties. I'm really sorry about that. But when we're talking about next here on the Buffalo Sabres, the goalie tandem has been built correctly. And the first person you really have to acknowledge here is, of course, Devin Levi. Now, I briefly mentioned Devin Levi a while ago. However, I do want to mention that this was the second season that we saw Devin Levi be in Buffalo. He had a small cup of coffee in Buffalo in 22-23. And in those 7 games that he played, he looked phenomenal with the Buffalo Sabres. This is a Devin Levi that when he was only 20 years old, he had a 5 wins in just 7 starts with Buffalo. He had a goals against average under 3. He seemed like a future star with the Buffalo Sabres. Now, what happened this past season? Unfortunately, we kind of went back down to reality for just a little bit. In 23 games this season with the Buffalo Sabres, he had a goals against average of 3.1. Not bad, but it wasn't as great as the 2.9 he had the year before. He also had a goals against average of 3.1 and a save percentage of 89.9, just one bit under 90. And that didn't look good with Devin Levi. But what more importantly did not look good was his win-loss record. So in his first full season playing for the Buffalo Sabres, he had 10 wins, 8 losses, and 2 overtime losses. So he was essentially around a 500 win-loss record as a goaltender. And a lot of times you can excuse that if the goals against average looks under 3. It wasn't. And then sometimes you can even excuse that if the save percentage is about 91, 92, 93. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So for Devin Levi, he's had a bit of a rough patch in his first full-time season. Now, why I'm not worried about this is because of how young he is. Because he is only 22 years old. All right? Because Devin Levi is so young with the Buffalo Sabres, I am not worried about what's going to happen to him in the future. He is going to be with the Buffalo Sabres for a next couple of years. All right, he is still on the entry-level deal. He's going to be under contract for the next 2 seasons. So, for Devin Levi, I am not worried about him at this point. Now, who is someone that we could definitely be looking at as someone who has definitely evolved over time? Of course, I'm talking about the other guy that's the battery of the goaltender for the Buffalo Sabres, and that is the greatest name in all of hockey, and that is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And this is someone who has earned the number 1 spot as the goaltender this past year. And as the number 1 goaltender with the Buffalo Sabres, let's keep in mind, this is technically his 4th season playing professional hockey, okay? He started out with the Rochester Americans, and then he moved up to the Buffalo Sabres. He had a few cups of coffee in 20 and in 2021. It wasn't until 2022 that he finally earned some valuable playing time with the Buffalo Sabres. And then this season, he had a majority of the games played, 54 to be exact, with the Buffalo Sabres. Shout out to Hockey Reference for the data. But overall, when it comes to Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 54 games this year, 27 wins, 22 losses, and 4 overtime losses. So, just a little bit over a 500 record as a starting goaltender with the Buffalo Sabres. How did the goals against average look? Way better from the year before. The year prior, he had a 3.6 goals against average. This year, he had a 2.57. Way better. He actually dropped less than 1 full point from his goals against average from the year prior. That's amazing by Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And then his save percentage went from a 89.2 to a 91.0. All right. That was almost a 2-point up from the year before. So for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, he had a breakout season with the Buffalo Sabres. He did a really stellar job. Not to mention, he had 5 shutouts on the year with Buffalo. So when I say the goalie tandem is built correctly, I want you to remember this is a Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen who's 25 years old. This is a Devin Levi who's 22 years old. So this is an organization that has 2 young goaltenders that are going to get ready and better as time goes on. So if you are the Buffalo Sabres, can you make the playoffs? Well, my answer to you is yes, you can make the playoffs. And how are they going to make the playoffs? What they did was bring back Lindy Ruff, bring back the most accomplished and one of the best coaches the Buffalo Sabres ever had. When they're going to make the playoffs, it's going to be due to their core that is promising. Not just Tage Thompson, but you have Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, and Alex Tuch as a part of that core. And then you also have a goalie tandem that was built correctly. All right. You have a Buffalo Sabres organization that has built around 2 young goaltenders, and they are going to get the job done in the long term. And there's also a Buffalo Sabres team that your defense is your strength, with not 7, but 8 defensemen that are going to be on your roster next year. And then lastly, the farm system is strong. In fact, it's the best strength the Buffalo Sabres have. So, it's a Vegas Hockey Hub. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and this is why the Buffalo Sabres can make the playoffs.